Hey, did Lori Vallow have a spiritual hitman? I'm going to let you answer that question at the end of today's podcast. This is Charlie Crimebuster. We're taking a deep dive into the investigation of Lori Vallow and her missing children. We're glad to have you as part of the podcast, and we'll get you caught up in just a moment. Right now, I just want to personally welcome you to the Charlie Crimebuster Crime Line. Well, hello and welcome to Charlie Crimebuster. We're glad to have you with us on the Charlie Crimebuster Show. It is our podcast, and we have been investigating Lori Vallow and her missing children. And boy, what an investigation! What a crime story, perhaps of the certainly of this year, I imagine. We're going to be talking today about, did Lori Vallow have a spiritual hitman, and was it Lori's brother, Alex Cox? Was he, rather, Lori's spiritual hitman? We're going to have that and more as we do continue that investigation. We have listeners all the way from one coast to the other coast, and we pick up new listeners seemingly every single week, and we're delighted to have each and every one of you. If you'd like to get caught up on some of the other podcasts, go to charliecrimebuster.com. There we have the podcasts of this past year already listed right there in chronological order for you to get caught up on. There's also a place there where you can subscribe yourself so that every Monday you'll get the podcast delivered straight to your box. And while you're there at charliecrimebuster.com, be sure and go to the resource page, because there we have some resources that might be of help to you, including the best safety apps of 2019. You're going to find all of that and more. Then thank you for being an engaged listener to the podcast. Now, you can reach me directly at Charlie Crimebuster. That's charliecrimebuster at gmail.com. Charlie, C-H-A-R-L-I-E, Crimebuster at gmail.com. We would love to hear from you and love to hear what you think about this case. If you have questions or comments, we certainly welcome them. Well, we got to get you caught up, and then we're going to talk about this spiritual hitman deal. Of course, as you know, it's all about JJ, who was 7 years of age, and Ty Lee, who's 17 years of age, and they've both been missing since September. And now, Vallow and her new husband, well, they had been living in Hawaii, and get this, without the kids. Now, Lori had been there, I guess, since early December, and remember now, she married Daybell just weeks before that. And that wedding had happened, well, just 2 weeks after Daybell's wife had died under what some people say may be suspicious circumstances. And an Idaho court, they had issued an order for Vallow to bring her children to authorities in Rexburg, Idaho. But she did not do that. And so then she was arrested on February the 20th there in Kauai, Hawaii, and her bail was set at $5 million. Now, authorities had learned about these missing children after Joshua Vallow's biological grandmother. She had reported that she had not heard from the boy, and so police in Idaho, they did a welfare check on him, and when they went to the house, Vallow and Daybell, well, they really lied about his whereabouts, said he was relatives. They went to check that out, and then when they returned the next day, well, Vallow and Daybell, they were gone. They were out of there. And in this mixed-up, crazy case, there are 3 deaths that are now currently under investigation. The most recent was Daybell's wife, Tammy, 49, who died in October. And back in, I guess back in July, Alex had shot Charles Vallow, the ex-husband of Lori Vallow. And then there's even another suspicious death, and that's Cox himself. And he was found unresponsive in Arizona. And as far as new news that's come up, I just read this week some interesting emails that they collected on some of those search warrants. And one set of emails, it actually revealed what Chad Daybell had sent to Lori Vallow. And it was about 7 missions that she and him together were to accomplish together. And those ideas, according to Fox 10, it included translating ancient records, writing a book about it, identifying, now this was interesting, identifying locations in Arizona for quote-unquote white camps, and then also the presidency of the Church of the Firstborn, And also, they were to establish food distribution as the tribulation started. And then they were to ordain individuals to translation and provide supplies to righteous members of families. Now, that probably doesn't mean a whole lot to you unless you realize the mindset of Chad and Lori. And again, last week we did a podcast on Lori Vallow. What was she thinking? There you could get into the religious mindset. And to get you a platform to where to go from is that religious mindset is that Christ is supposed to return, according to them, that they've seen in the vision. He'll return in July 2020. Then the new millennium will be set up. There'll be 144,000 people that will reign with Christ. Now, Chad and Lori are to be their spiritual leaders, kind of a new Adam and Eve to this new millennium. There's going to be a calamity of tribulation, terrible things happening. And these righteous people will reign with Christ right through all of that. So you kind of got to get that going in order to understand what those 7 missions are all about. Hey, there was something else that came up this week that was a little interesting. It seems that Chad Daybell had written an essay. And we get this from Desert News. He wrote an essay entitled Moving into the Second Half of My Life. And he wrote that 12 days after his wife died. That's according to the East Idaho News. And I thought this was interesting. He said, my dear wife Tammy passed away in her sleep early on October the 19th when I woke up around 6 a.m. It was clear she had been gone for several hours. Came as a shock. Couldn't believe it. I hadn't been awakened somehow. But all indications are that her spirit simply slipped away during the night. Her face looked serene, with her eyes closed in a slight smile. It was devastating to discover her that way, but I'm so grateful that her death was peaceful. This might help you understand a little bit about what these folks feel about death, because there's a lot of death going on around them. He went on to say, I'm in the process of implementing what she told me to do. She indicated that my life has 2 parts, and that it was planned before I even came to the earth. And then also, the other new news, before we get into this spiritual hitman. Well, the other news is that an Idaho judge, Lori Vallow had a $5 million bail in Hawaii. Well, that was lowered to $1 million on Friday. And that was when this doomsday mother appeared in the Madison County Court. And that was the first time she appeared there since her 2 children went missing about 6 months ago. And you remember she was extradited from Hawaii this last week. And they were asking the judge to lower it to $10,000. That's what Edwina Elcox, who was her attorney, and called the bill excessive, unconstitutional. Well, I guess the judge didn't buy it. Also put some restrictions that if she does end up posting the bond, she's going to have to wear an ankle monitor. She can't leave Madison or surrounding counties. And as of Friday of this past week, wasn't really clear whether Chad, her new husband, would be able to get her out on bail or not. That hasn't been cleared up to this point. But today, we're going to talk about the possibility of how her deceased brother, Alex Koch, may have been her spiritual hitman. And I'm going to let you make that decision. So, just fasten your seatbelt and hang on. We're in for quite a wild ride. Now, Alex Koch is the brother to Lori Vallow, and we have come to realize, in looking at these deaths, that he and she seem to be somehow connected to these, and I have what I call suspicious activity, and there is something in investigations called reasonable suspicion. And then there is probable cause. Now, I don't know that I'm quite to the point that I have probable cause, but I certainly have reasonable suspicion to believe that Chad Cox is indeed her spiritual hitman. And it goes all the way back to Lori's 3rd husband. Now, she's been married 5 times. And the 3rd husband, we find, is the first time that Chad, her brother, really gets involved in his sister's life, at least that we know of, where there's some questionable activity. In fact, Fox 10 had reported that Cox served, now get this, 90 days in jail. That was for assaulting her 3rd husband, the father of Tylee Ryan. Now, Cox's best friend, they had some ideas about this and passed it on to news people. Mary Tracy, she said this in a remote video, and that was an interview with Fox 10. She said of Chad that he was extremely goofy, funny, and silly. It seems that Tracy had met Cox at a comedy club in Phoenix back in 2006. They both did stand-ups, and they became fast friends. Now, Tracy remembers Cox telling her that he had to go to Austin, Texas back in August 2017 to handle, quote, family affairs. Now, Tracy later learned that Cox had pleaded guilty to assaulting Joseph Ryan, Lori's former husband. They were involved in some sort of child custody hearing, and he actually tased Ryan twice, and he threatened to kill him. And for that, Cox was charged with aggravated assault with a weapon, and he was sentenced to 90 days in jail. So we already have proof that Cox has already been involved in handling his sister's dirty work, if you please. Now, even though he was in jail, he seemed to be still consumed of getting to Lori's third husband. In one letter, he said, "Do me a favor, call Janice. Ask her to put Joe's address on a postcard and his license plate number. I think it'll be popular here." In other words, he wanted to get that name out among the other people in jail so that they ran across him, they might hurt him as well. And in another letter, he said, "Can you get a picture from Lori of one of her ex-husbands," which was the third one, "send it to me. Some of the guys would like to, quote, unquote, hang out with him." So not only is he wanting to do something to her third husband, he's wanting to get some of his fellow inmates involved on it as well. So we already have a history of Cox, getting involved. In fact, in 2011, Texas Travis County ordered Cox to pay $5,000 in restitution to Joseph Ryan, her third husband, and they placed Cox on probation. And that, of course, was when Lori and Joseph went through a long custody battle for Tylee. Now, the third husband, strangely enough, he's dead too. He died in 2018 from a heart attack. Or, after you hear all this that we're going to go through the day, you may say, was it? Question mark. And unfortunately, we're not going to really know about this one because he was cremated. No chance for an autopsy there. So her knight in shining armor, her brother, already involved in her dirty work. Now, I guess we call it dirty work, but according to her belief, she might call it as divine work. And so we already have him now involved in this situation with the third husband. But there's much more to come. But first, we've got to take a moment to tell you about our Courageous Citizen of the Week. Now, each week we try to, on the podcast, bring to you some good news about courageous citizens who help others. And this courageous citizen story has both domestic violence and workplace violence as ingredients. And we also have praise. Praise from the highest elected law enforcement official in Sullivan County, Tennessee. And it happened just last month on February the 13th. And there's Sullivan County, Tennessee, the Sheriff Jeff Cassidy there. He praised the actions of a concealed carry permit holder. That holder ended a deadly domestic violence incident at a dentist's office there in Sullivan County. You see, this armed citizen shot and detained an active shooter who had killed his own wife and had planned to harm others in the office. So here we have another good man with a gun. Another good man with a gun saves others, and he is considered now our courageous citizen of the week. Well, back to our feature story. Lori Vallow's spiritual hitman, Alex Cox. We already proved that he was her protector, his willingness to go to jail for his sister in this malicious assault of her third husband, Ryan. And isn't it convenient, or suspicious now, that we find next he actually shoots and kills her fourth husband, Charles Vallow, and then he claims self-defense. We certainly need a little deeper dive into that shooting, don't you think? Well, it happened just this past July the 11th. Lori, she was living separate from her husband, Charles Vallow. Actually, at this point, they were living in two different states. So Charles drives up, and he's going to pick up his son, JJ, to take him to school, because JJ was in summer classes. We now have to wonder, why did he come over? And when he came over, why was Alex Cox there present. Alex Cox had come the night before, had spent the night, and was there ready when Charles showed up. So we have to wonder, why did he come over? Was it a setup from the start? Did she use some excuse to bring him over to her home? Well, he comes in, and according to her brother Alex, Charles and Lori, they argue. And somehow during that time, there was a baseball bat that was brought out. Some have said that it was Tylee that brought the bat out. We're not really sure at this point because there's been a lot of misinformation about it. But according to Alex now, Charles takes the bat, hits him over the head, and Alex goes into his room, gets a gun, comes out, and shoot and kills Charles. You know, it seemed all pretty tight and fit until you consider the following. Number one, when police showed up that day, the responding police did not know at that time that Alex, Lori's brother, had already gone to jail for assaulting Lori's third husband, and now he shoots and kills her fourth husband. Number two, that head wound that Alex reported, well, it was hardly noticeable. In fact, when I viewed the body camera footage from the interview, I couldn't even see it that very day there at Lori's home. And you know, if a man swings a baseball bat and hits you on the head, well, I believe you and others are going to know it, and it'll not be a mere skin wound. And then there was the suspicious behavior of Lori herself. Now reports lead us to believe that she was actually there when her estranged husband was shot by her brother. So what does she do? She gets JJ, decides to take him to school. But get this. For some strange reason, she goes out and she gets into Charles's rental car. And she takes JJ to school in the very car that her dead husband drove to pick up JJ. Now, there was other vehicles there. Why did she, number one, take Charles's car, and number two, why would she just take her son to school as it was another ordinary day, rather than a day when your own estranged husband was killed by your brother in your own home? One has to wonder. Perhaps they wanted to get Tylee to hold up their part of the story, and then maybe it was best to have the children away when the police arrived. Well, next, you have to think about Lori when we saw her on body cam there on that day, just after her estranged husband had been killed. She wasn't upset. She was remarkably calm, even made a joking remark to a neighbor about being sorry for all the commotion and smiling and giggling about it. Just didn't really make sense. She certainly did not have the look that she was overly concerned that her brother had just shot her estranged husband in her house. And then, there was the money angle. Yep, the money angle. You see, leading a mission from God, it must be expensive work, for she had already stolen at least $35,000 from her husband's business account. And now, we know that Charles had something like $1 million life insurance policy. But Lori did not know. She did not know that Charles had just changed the beneficiary form from Lori's name to his sister's name. She did not know that at that time. And on top of that fact, there are people who know Charles best say that he would not be the type to use violence at all, and if he did have a bat, it would have been to defend himself from a man with a gun. And then there's the party. Yep, the party, the pool party, where she laughed and swam with friends even before the blood had died in her own home, even before the blood had dried, rather, in her own home. She was out partying about her life. So I think you can see where I have reasonable suspicion that maybe Alex could have been Lori's spiritual hitman. And now the police are to re-interview if they wanted to go back, now that they know that Alex was involved with the assault on her third husband, and now that he had killed her fourth husband. Wouldn't it be something if the police could re-interview now Tylee and JJ? Maybe they could get something from the kids. But unfortunately, at this point, they're not able to speak to Tylee and JJ, for they are missing without a trace, and have been since the month of September. All right, there's that crazy music again. That means it's time for our Crazy Crook story. We try to lighten the load on serious podcasts like this by sharing from week to week a Crazy Crook story, and this one comes from New York. It seems that a New York guy, there's a lot of people in the news lately about police imposters, a lot of news about that, rather. These are either cop wannabes or just plain dumb people, and the dumbest of these imposters recently showed his own lack of brains recently in New York. And that was a New York man who was arrested recently after he allegedly tried, now get this, to pull over a van full of police detectives. That's right. According to Fox News, the man identified as 25-year-old Valerie Portlock. He reportedly activated emergency lights, sounded an air horn as he attempted to pull the van over in the Long Island town of Hicksville. And that's when the occupants of the van, members of the Nassau County Police Department Electronic Squad, they identified themselves, and Portlock remarkably then fled the scene. Well, he was later arrested by Highway Patrol, and he was charged criminal impersonation, reckless endangerment, and fleeing the police. Well, our feature story today is about someone else who fled a scene. It's what I call the spiritual hitman for Lori Vallow Daybell. The ever-all-protecting Alex will do anything for his sister, including, he did flee the scene, he went to jail. He went to jail for an assault with a deadly weapon on Lori's third husband, and then killed her fourth husband while in her house claiming self-defense. Now, police later called this killing very suspicious and were still investigating. But now we have something else. Lori's niece, Melanie, who also, interesting enough, became a member of that doomsday group. And the niece, Melanie, she began spending time with Lori and the religious group, and then she turned around and demanded a divorce over the summer from her husband, Brandon. He said, I thought it was a pretty happy marriage, so it was pretty overwhelming. That's what Brandon said. But before the divorce was final, someone driving Charles Vallow, remember Charles Vallow? He was the fourth husband that was killed. Even after he was killed, there was someone driving his vehicle, and that person attempted to kill Brandon, which was now the ex-husband of Lori's niece, Melanie. Brandon said he described seeing a gun with a silencer attached to it. And on October the 2nd, as he was returning from the gym, someone took a shot at him and missed him by inches. Brandon, he believes that it was Lori's brother Alex. He stated the gun had a silencer on it. Could easily have been mistaken for some other kind of gun. Now remember that if you do not have a knowledge of weapons. In fact, Brandon was so convinced that it was Alex taking up for Lori's niece, Melanie, that he hired a private investigator to locate his wife. And, now get this, guess who was with his wife when they were located? Yes, Mr. Spiritual Hitman himself, Alex Cox. That's right. The investigator stated that when he found Melanie, he also found Alex Cox with her, and they were out there packing, getting ready to go join Lori Vallow, who had already moved. And it's kind of interesting because even though it appears that Melanie wanted custody of her own children, well, it's probably a good thing that the judge did not grant that, because while they were getting ready to go to the new place, they were taking the children's stuff, the bicycles, the beds, and they just put them out on the lawn just for people to pick up as trash. So probably a good thing that that judge said that she could not see her children unless it was supervised visits. So it looks like that we might have a spiritual hitman here. Remember, number one, Alex is a spiritual hitman for Lori, assaults her third husband with a weapon. Number two, Alex is a spiritual hitman for Lori, kills her fourth husband, Charles, conveniently claimed self-defense. Unbelievable by most. And now, number three, as a spiritual hitman, he's the key suspect in the attempted murder of Melanie's ex-husband, Brannon, who happens to be Melanie, the niece of Lori Vallow. And now, there's more. Hang on. 10 days. 10 days before the wife of Lori's new husband died, that wife was shot at by a masked man with what she thought was a paintball gun. But let me ask you, could it not have easily been the gun with a silencer that misfired, or missed, which she might think was a paintball gun? Now really, considering that she died just 10 days later after that, do you really think it was a paintball gun? Because 10 days later, she was found dead in bed. And Chad, Lori's new husband, well, he wanted a quick funeral, remember, no autopsy. After all, he had things to do, which was mainly now marrying Lori Vallow, whose children are missing. And he married her 2 weeks after burying his dead wife. But don't worry, this doomsday spiritualist, you see, seems he had a vision. He had a convenient vision where his dead wife, Tammy, blessed his union with Lori, appearing in all white before him. So, I guess now Chad and Lori can get on with their own business of leading the 144,000 with Christ into the tribulation. Certainly no easy task for this new Adam and Eve in the coming millennium. And we already know that from Computer C's they have no less than 7 special missions now. And so they cannot be bothered by loose ends. But how about Alex Cox? How about this so-called spiritual hitman? Could he not be a loose end? Friend, not anymore. For just one day after it was announced that police were going to exhume the body of Tammy, Chad's former wife. One day after that, Alex Cox, this suspicious spiritual hitman, was found dead in his own home, under what some investigators are again calling suspicious. Now we are awaiting toxicology reports, both from Tammy and Alex, regarding their death. Let me ask you, do you think he knew too much? Or did he just fall on his sword, knowing maybe that the death of Tammy would reveal something sinister? Now don't feel bad for the grief-stricken relatives. Both Chad and Lori are convinced at the second coming that all their loved ones will be resurrected, return in July. And after all the tribulation time of earthquakes, disease, and other calamity, well, it's best they miss all that horror and live in their resurrected bodies. For review, the spiritual hitman's list. Lori's third husband, assault with a weapon. Alex went to jail for that one. Lori's fourth husband, dead of shotgun wounds. Lori's niece ex-husband, attempted murder. Number 4, Lori's new husband's late wife, attempted murder. Paintball gun, confused with a weapon with a silencer that misfired. And number 5, Laura's new husband's late wife, dead in bed, perhaps poisoned. And 6, his own self. Was he poisoned? Now I have to say this. I don't want to say it, but I have to say it. If something bad did happen to Lori's children, is it not a long reach to think that maybe her spiritual hitman may have taken care of it, helping them to slip away into life after, much like Tammy did? Her husband did state that she just eased away into eternity, peaceful. Is this what happened to her children? And was this spiritual hitman a part of that? And was it he that took care of the bodies? He was seen with Lori, struggling with a large tub at the new storage unit they had rented. Took it there, and then the very next day came back and removed it, large tub he was struggling with. Did those tubs perhaps hold the precious bodies of Lori's children? I hope not. So here is the tale of Lori Vallow's Daybell's spiritual hitman. Will he now become the fall guy? Will he be the scapegoat now that he's not here to defend himself or connect the suspicious deaths to Lori? Will the attorney attempt to paint him as the bad guy, to attempt to defend Lori? And Chad, to this point, who has not been arrested, is he involved? And if so, how much? Oh, much mystery yet to solve. Don't forget, our focal point has to be J.J. and Tylee. They deserve so much more. Will we ever know what happened to them? Now, if you do happen to know anything about this case, please do contact the authorities. Someone needs to come to justice. These children deserve better. You could, just maybe, might make that happen. So let me encourage you, if you do have news, please be sure and bring it forth so that we can find out what happened to those kids. And if you have comments or questions, like to contact us directly, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Go to the website, charliecrimebuster.com. You can get caught up on other podcasts that we have. And until this time next time, when once again we'll be with you with maybe even some more information about this case. Who knows? It's still very, very active. So my news to you and my advice, stay safe, stay alert. The life you save may be your very own.